So we're in the second week of this celebration series of 5 key lessons, back to school, 5 key lessons from the master teacher, Jesus Christ. We looked at prayers last week of the simple prayer of help, thanks, wow. And so this week we're looking at presence, how to be here, presence, and what Jesus has to offer us in regards to this. Have any of you ever heard of a man named Bernie Krause? Bernie Krause, right? He is a nature and sound recording artist. He's been doing this for decades. His job is to record nature and its undisturbed elements for use on movies, television, in so many different areas. So Bernie was explaining that in 1968, in order to get 1 hour of natural sound within the world, no airplanes, no air conditioner, no nasty hum from the fluorescent light ballasts, you know what I'm talking about, right? So uninterrupted, natural sound. It took 15 hours of recording in order to be able to get 1 hour that he could use, okay? 15 hours to 1 hour of use. 2008, 2,000 hours. 2,000 hours it took of recording in order for him to get 1 hour of natural sound. He says nowadays 50% of the places that he would go to in order to get sound, natural sound, he can't use anymore. 50% of the places. Our world is filled with noise. Yeah? Our world is filled with noise. Can I tell you another story from school? Okay, so last week we talked about me being in kindergarten, and it was great. So Monday I was in kindergarten again, but then on Wednesday I got to be in the lunchroom for a full 2 hours. Do you know how much bigger third graders are to kindergartners? It's like the size difference is huge. The noise level is like so much different. Being 2 hours in the lunchroom at one time, the time went by really, really quick, but it was my first time being in there with the third graders and the second graders versus being in there with the kindergartners, the noise level. And so then the correctional officers, the lunchroom people, would every once in a while get on the microphone and say, "Children, it's time for you to remember the rules, and we need to be able to talk in lower voices." And that lasts for 5 seconds, yeah, that's being kind. And so they just go back to it. There's just this hum, and there's no acoustic tile, so it's just all over the place, the noise. It's just absolutely frenetic. But let's remember that based on this scripture passage, this isn't new. Noise, commotion, all of that stuff, crowds pressing in. This isn't new. This is something that Jesus faced and his disciples faced. So Jesus is walking, and actually this is a story within a story. So just before this, a religious professional asks Jesus to come and heal his daughter, who is on death's door. And so Jesus is walking with his disciples to heal Jairus' daughter. And in the midst of moving that direction, the crowds are pressing in, and this woman is in need of healing. How phenomenal is this? That again, it goes back to what we talked about last week, is that sometimes our prayers don't have to be actually vocalized in order for the prayer to be met, for healing to happen. It doesn't need to be a formal prayer. This woman was in need of healing, and she believed that Jesus, just by touching him, not even him himself, but something that's connected to him, his prayer cloth, his shawl that he's wearing, she was just touching the fringe of his prayer cloth, and she was healed instantly. So Jesus is in this pressing crowd, and he asks a question, and I wonder whether the disciples are like, seriously? Because he asks, Who touched me? And Peter's like, everybody? Everybody. And Jesus is like, no, you don't understand. Somebody just touched me with purpose and with focus. How many of you have ever shot with a digital SLR, a single lens reflex camera, one of those big cameras, or manual focus lens? Have any of you ever used like a manual camera? Oh, okay. We had a bunch of hands raised at the 8:30, so this was a little bit easier. So we're going to give you some photography lessons this morning. So the lens, there's this thing on it called aperture. Have any of you ever heard of aperture? Okay, so the aperture. So if you want to do one of those portrait shots where the person in the foreground is in focus and everything else behind it's blurred out, what you do is you set your lens to like 1.8, 2.2, and it does a soft focus effect. It focuses the background, blurs out, focuses on the foreground, blurs out the background. Got that? Okay? If you want everything in focus, if you're shooting a nature scene or landscape scene, what you want to do is the exact opposite. You want to set that aperture to about f/22 so that it gets everything in focus. Everything, foreground and background. You're shooting this very, very wide depth of field. Everything's in focus. So you shoot at f/22. Okay? Does that make sense? But in order to do that, you need lots of light. Hold that thought. You need lots of light in order to be able to shoot at f/22. The reason I bring that up is I think that Jesus is shooting at f/22 right now in this story. He doesn't have a laser sharp focus. He's not just focusing on one person. He's focusing on everybody. His focus is so immense, it's so widespread, he's got everyone and everyone's needs in focus. He is so focused on everyone that he feels the healing energy leave him even in the midst of all of the commotion, in the midst of all the chaos, right? Jesus is able, he's shooting at f/22. He's got everybody in focus. Kind of like what we had to do in the lunchroom. Okay? So if I were to have focused on just one person in that lunchroom that needed help and just focused on them, I would miss out on the needs of all of the other children in that lunchroom that also needed their milk cartons opened. And that darn straw inside the honest kids' pouches. You know, it's just crazy. So what you have to do is you're scanning the scene. You're scanning it, right? Adam knows this from a lifeguard perspective. He's got to constantly move and scan the surface of the water. If he were to have focused on just one area of the water, you're toast as a lifeguard, right? As a lifeguard, you've got to constantly... Jesus is the ultimate lifeguard that's shooting at f/22. He's got everybody in focus. He's so tuned into the needs of everyone. Isn't that phenomenal? Isn't that neat? He's at peace in the midst of all the commotion. He is present in the midst of all the stuff that's going on. How many of you have all the stuff going on in your lives? Some of you have a lot of stuff going on in your lives. There's a way to have peace in the midst of all that stuff going on in your lives. There are people, I know people, that have that kind of peace, even in the midst of all the chaos and all the commotion. In fact, I was in that lunchroom, and I was okay with the commotion and the chaos in the midst of all of that, because underneath all of that, there's this joy. There's this exuberance. There's this energy that's going off of what they're doing. It's not an awful commotion. It's this energy that you get only from kindergarten through third grade. That, man, if we could bottle that up, yeah, we would have $1 million business on our hands. But nevertheless, even in the midst of all that commotion, there's a way to shoot at f/22 with your focus and with your energy and be at peace. Sometimes people think that chaos and peace are mutually exclusive from one another. Right? Is that if it's chaotic, there's no way to have peace. But there is a way. Jesus shows it. He exemplifies that he has peace even in the midst of all this stuff going on. But I dare say that there's a ton of people that are out there that it looks like there's peace, but deep inside, they're raging. They're raging. There's anger. There's resentment. There's lack of forgiveness. And there's this surface that you think is going okay, but in the undertow, or in the stuff that's going on, in the undercurrent underneath, there's lots of stuff that's churning. So it's not that chaos and peace are mutually exclusive, but that what is tied together is peace and presence. You can't be present. You can't really honestly be present without peace. Does that make sense? You have to have this inner peace. You have to have this peace in order for you to actually be present, to be keenly aware, to be shooting at F-22, right? Or even at 1.8 at the times that needs to happen. There is this situation that we have where peace is the key to all of this. Peace and presence. But peace is doing, though. God wants you to have the peace that surpasses all understanding. And how many of you have peace in your lives right now? It's okay to admit it if you feel like you've got peace. That's great. Maybe you're like me, where you've got more peace than you used to have, but you'd really like a little bit more. You know, that peace is a journey. A wise teacher said, peace is every step. Peace is every step. Peace is doing. Peace is practice. Practice. And so just like what we talked about the other day, about practicing, and nobody learns how to ride a bike, right? Except in actually getting on the bike. Nobody learns how to ride a bike in the classroom, right? Peace is by doing. So I have another story that I'd like to share with you from Anthony DeMello about peace. Peace is something that you do. It's about what you do. The disciples of this rabbi once said to him, "Tell us, dear rabbi, how should we serve God?" And the rabbi, this expert, right? This expert, their teacher, he says, "How should I know?" Not something that you want to hear from your teacher about how to do things. How should we serve God? And his response is, "How should I know?" He goes, "But let me tell you a story that could probably help you in this." He said, "Once upon a time, a king had two friends. Both of them were found guilty of crime and sentenced to death. Now, even though the king loved them, he dared not acquit them outright for fear of giving a bad example to the people. So this is the verdict that he gave. A rope was to be stretched across a deep chasm, and each of the two men was to walk over it to safety and freedom, or, if he fell, to his death. The first of the two got across safely. The other shouted to the first to cross the chasm, Tell me, friend, how did you do it?" The first shouted back, "How should I know? All I did was this. When I found myself listening to one side, I leaned the other way." How do you get peace in your life? How should I know? All I know is this, is that if you find yourself going down one direction, and it's not peace, go to the other side. Timeouts. We talked about it in the children's message. If the creator of the universe rested after creating the world, what makes us think in our ego and in our hubris that we can't take a break? There's a reason why Sabbath is rule number 4 in the top 10. Rest. Rest. What do we do when our children have hit the wall and they are done? They have tapped out. We can see it. They've got the dark circles under their eyes. They start using words that we know only get used when they are done. what do? We got the old leather belt out and we show them. No, that's silly. That's silliness. We say, I think you might need a timeout. Right? I think you need to rest. We have this word that we do not use in the house, which is the T word. So you don't say to Fiona, you're tired. I'm not tired! Because then suddenly it's like, whoa, we just crossed a whole other threshold. So you got to come about it a different sort of way, you know? This is where routines are good. This is what I'm going to ask you to think about doing. So keep doing the help, thanks, wow. Okay? Keep doing the help, thanks, wow. But add into your practice. If you don't already have a practice of taking a time out every single day, start taking a time out. Give yourself a time out. Do you still have those kitchen timers? Little dial kitchen timers that dings at the end of a certain amount of time? Okay? Or your oven does. You've got timers. You've got a timer on your phone. Set it for 5 minutes. Set on the stairs. Right? That's Fiona's spot. She's got a timeout spot. Sit on the stairs and breathe for 5 minutes. So this is what we're going to do. Right? Fiona can clean while we take a time out from this point forward.
44.
Right? For 44 minutes, right, exactly. Not 5 minutes, 40. No. So start with 5 minutes. Turn the dial, set the timer, take a time out. Try this once a day, okay? Stop the railings, stop the to-do lists from running in your heads. Good luck with that, by the way. Okay, good luck. Be kind. See, peace comes from patient, non-judgmental, non-striving practice. It will take practice. You're going to find that 5 minutes, that first time that you do the 5 minutes, feels like an eternity. Okay? And there's going to be thoughts that are going to go across your mind. Introduce yourself to those thoughts. Have those thoughts introduce themselves to you and say hello and allow them to go their merry way. Don't labor on them, and don't say, I shouldn't be thinking, because then suddenly you get all anxious. It's like, just relax, relax. Introduce yourself, say hello, thought, and let it go away. 5 minutes. Try it each day. And somebody says, well, is that prayer? It's like, yeah, that's prayer. Because what that's going to do is move your life into a practice of prayerful living, a peaceful presence, so that even when the storm's happening, whether it's on the outside or in the inside, that presence, that practice, that time out is going to move you into a space where you can listen to the heartbeat of God and be at peace. And then be fully present with your friends, your family. We all deserve a time out. Give yourself a time out. And may you feel God's grace and peace in the midst of that. May it be so.